copy, good, very good.
Welcome to the RedMed podcast, Rescue, Expedition and Disaster Medicine, where we provide a platform for healthcare professionals working in or aspiring to join rescue, expedition and disaster response teams. A platform to share information, advice and opportunities and connect like-minded RedMed individuals in our community. Good morning everyone and welcome to episode 3 of the RedMed podcast. This podcast is powered by SOS Coffee, Guatemalan coffee, which we sell locally or internationally to fund our medical missions and free CPR and bleeding control courses for Guatemalan citizens, hopefully to save lives across the country. I'm joined again by our crew chief at SOS, Chris Sharp. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning.
We just want to start off today by looping back to the first episode where we discussed briefly about being self-sufficient in a rescue, expedition or disaster environment. There's so many factors involved that you could be separated from the group. You could find yourself in changing or challenging circumstances. And if you're not self-sufficient and you don't have that knowledge and skill or the equipment, then anxiety can kick in, and anxiety is known to affect your decision making, which can have a snowball effect, cascade down, affect your ability to communicate, navigate, survive, or your patient treatment. So we just want to look a little bit about self-sufficiency and some of the key elements of survival. To add a little bit of context before we get into it really, I did a bit of survival training in the British Army on the commando course. I did another 3-month spell in Norway in the Arctic during an Arctic survival course. I've done mountain leader training in the UK, and they're kind of the formal bases, and picked up a few bits and bobs along the way. And Chris, you've done a bit of formal training as well, I think.
I did training in the military as a survival instructor. I used to teach groups from the ship when we'd visit various exotic islands. I'd take them off away from the beach, pretty much all over the globe. And then here in Guatemala, I've taught helicopter pilots, the military guys, recently a group from the UK in the jungle for a week. You're more high altitude and mountains. I like sea survival, coast survival, jungle, woodlands and forests, that kind of area. And it's one of my hobbies.
Yeah, you're very rarely seen in urban areas these days. So I guess we've got a little bit of experience between us covering mountain and Arctic, jungle and desert. We've been in situations ourselves where we've had to be self-sufficient. We've been alone. And it's potentially being part of a rescue expedition disaster team. You could get separated. You could have a mechanical problem with your aircraft and have to land in the middle of nowhere and be self-sufficient for a number of hours or days. So, the last time I experienced that was when we planned a search and rescue for a tourist in Guatemala. She'd been missing 5 days. On the 5th day, we involved the aircraft. We flew over, identified some key reference points, came back, planned our mission, had a plan A, plan B, plan C. Couldn't land. We had to rappel in, chop our way through the jungle. I think I rappelled down 3 waterfalls in the canyon to get to her. So it was a butt-gusting yomp in with a 200-pound rucksack through a humid jungle at high altitude. And just as I got to the patient, you decided to drop another rescue in right on top of me. So he had a 30-second journey versus my 3 hours. But together, we provided first aid, we stabilised the patient, and then you short-hauled the other rescuer out with the patient. As soon as you left me, I was in this canyon. There was no way back up unless we prussiked. There was no way back down unless I continued to rappel down a series of waterfalls for about 20 miles to the coast. So really, I was just going to wait for you to come back. And as soon as you disappeared, the clouds came in and closed the airspace. And so I just changed my wet socks, put a woolly hat on, took my bothy bag out, roll mat, got nice and comfortable, had some M&Ms and a cup of tea, and I was in my element. I felt so cosy and comfortable in the knowledge that I had all of the equipment I needed to be comfortable. I wasn't going to get cold, I wasn't going to get wet, I wasn't going to go hungry or thirsty. So then I broke out the communications. I sent all of you guys a WhatsApp message saying, if you don't come back or you can't come back by midday tomorrow. If you haven't got to me by midday, I'll walk south and meet you at the coast. Unfortunately, because of the walls of the canyon and the altitude, that message didn't leave my telephone, so I just waited. But very comfortable in the knowledge that I was okay. There was snakes, there was waterfalls, there was rockfall, but I found a comfortable place, had enough kit on my chest rig and in my rucksack to wait it out, however long that would have been. I think I had enough supplies for about 72 hours, plus my survival kit to extend that. And as luck would have it, you came back, there was a gap in the cloud, and I think you scooped me up about an hour later, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it was comfortable. Knowledge dispels fear. I wasn't anxious, I felt very comfortable, which really kept a level head and allowed me to make clear decisions.
You brought up there, Chris, is knowledge weighs nothing. If I was perfectly happy, I wasn't happy that I left you there, don't get me wrong. I was more content. I knew you would be safe because you have the knowledge, the skill and the ability. That is why one of the reasons you were chosen to be put in there in the first place. And like you say, knowledge dispels fear. It doesn't weigh anything. It may cost something, although with social media you can practice a lot in your own back garden nowadays. And it's part of this whole service as a rescue expedition disaster. You're a professional, and part of the profession is preparing yourself, let alone other people.
Yeah.
Which goes back to your planning, is are you actually the right person to be put in the right place at the right time with the right skills?
You can't afford to have an ego and just jump up and down, wave your hand in the air and volunteer for tasks you're not capable and prepared of carrying out, because at the end of the day, if you get stuck on the side of a hill with a patient and you can't look after yourself, you're negligent to yourself and the patient. So you've got to be well prepared for any situation.
And with the hierarchy, the rescuer never needs rescuing, which is the golden mantra. Whereas a lot of people forget that. We've seen time again, we've flown to incidents and various local search groups, incorrectly dressed, incorrectly equipped, incorrectly trained, virtually on the case of being casualties themselves. I know when we did Akatanango, when we drove up, we ended up dealing with 3 or 4 local guys from teams who were collapsed because they had no water, no food, incorrect clothing. So it's all part of this risk management, your favourite word.
And the P's, prior planning and preparation, prevents poor performance.
Poor performance. And so I think we've kind of emptied your flight survival vest out today.
Yeah.
Which has got a lot of items in, more than you thought you had.
Yeah, it's like a TARDIS. You don't realise what you carry.
But it's comfortable, it's small, and it's there to survive. It's not there for a comfortable camping trip, which people sometimes, I'm cold, I'm wet. Well, if you've got the correct knowledge on how to build the correct fire, the correct type of shelter, all these kind of things, you probably won't be cold and wet. You might be, but you're surviving as opposed to being on a camping trip.
Yeah, and I think the key is that this equipment should be, whether you're hiking up a mountain or you're rappelling in or being short-hauled in or however you're moving around, this equipment shouldn't be too bulky. It should be nice and light. If it's big and heavy, you're not going to carry it, or you're likely to dip into it and start depleting your survival reserves. It should be small enough not to be an embuggerance or to interfere with your load. And equally, one of the things that we should consider, we consider this a lot in Iraq, when we got ambushed and bombs were going off and we were being shot at. When adrenaline kicks in and you need to move from A to B, or from a burning helicopter out, or from a vehicle that's just rolled over, or there's a rock fall and you're going to move, your natural response is to move with what's in your hand or attached to your body. You're not going to look around and grab the rucksack, or you're not going to have time to go to the rear of the aircraft and get your rucksack or your survival pack out. You're not going to run back into your tent and grab your sleeping bag. You're going to move from an area of higher risk to an area of lower risk with what's attached to your body. So it's got to be light, it's got to be comfortable and practical.
Yep. A lot of people, they carry an extensive survival kit in a small rucksack, especially out here. I do on the helicopter. I've got a larger bag with a machete, a hammock, just things to make life more comfortable. I don't technically need them, but it's just more easy. But my key equipment is on my vest, especially with aviation incidents. Statistically, I can't remember the statistics from, if it's not fastened to you, you will not have it.
Yep.
Especially if the aircraft rolls over, it's rolled halfway down a mountain. Where that survival kit used to be, it's probably not going to be there anymore. And then, like you say, fight or flight, you start getting out, you go. If you haven't got it with you, it's not physically attached to you or in your pocket, you're probably not going to get it.
Well, this comes back to the Kurdistan story again. We had an ambulance and a clinic, and when we had to bug out because we were under fire, we literally were in the trenches with our belt pouch, with our IFAC. That was it. That was the only thing attached to us. The big med bags were in the ambulance, and we didn't have anything else, but that was attached to us. So looking at the P's, prior planning, preparation prevents poor performance. That takes me on to PPE, again with prevention, personal protective equipment. Hopefully you won't find yourself in a survival situation with injuries if you're wearing the right personal protective equipment, or at least your PPE can minimise the injury that you sustain. PPE might be a helmet, gloves, sturdy boots, a Nomex flight suit. It might be mountaineering gloves, it might be sunscreen, it might be insect repellent. Just things to keep you comfortable and prevent you becoming a casualty, or have little things that might just bug you and niggle you and affect your critical thinking and judgment. So then after the PPE, we kind of go on to a generic concept, which is the rule of threes. I think you can probably talk about that.
People carry everything from the world. And essentially we're talking now when it goes bad, or we're surviving. And there's lots of different mnemonics around, but they're all driven. It's called the rule of threes. You've got 3 seconds following a bad decision, usually. Probably a bit longer, maybe a bit less, but it fits in with the rule of threes. You then can survive 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours in extremes of temperature, extremely cold, extremely hot. What people don't realise, they always think food, but you've got 3 days without water. But you can last 3 weeks without food. You probably won't be very well at the end of it, but you will still be alive. So that's the rule of threes. 3 seconds bad decision, 3 minutes without air, 3 hours in extreme temperatures, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. So following that can guide you in what you carry.
Yeah, those 3 days without water and 3 days without food really does link into the principles of survival, really. I generally look at shelter, fire, water and food, but I think you break it down further than that, don't you?
I follow the protection, location, water and food.
Yep.
Protection from further injury. So some form of first aid, whether it's an IFAC, a trauma dressing, a mini first aid kit, ciprofloxacin, loratadine, antihistamines, something to either treat injuries or prevent you getting worse. Under protection is also protection from the elements, from the sun, the cold, whether it be a simple shelter, a hat, a head net for insects,
insulation,
insect repellent, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we move on to location. Nobody wants to be a survivor, and you're only a survivor when you get rescued. We all want to go home. So location is the key thing. In the United States, I watched a YouTube video recently. If you're specifically aviation,